Welcome back to my channel. We are finally done with 2020 movies. So today we're going to talk about my most anticipated movies of 2021. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your most anticipated movies of 2021 are. And make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these videos because it helps me out immensely if you do that. Also, if you're new here and you like movies, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases and some classics. So the way this is going to work is this will be in order of supposed release date. I won't rank these in order of anticipation because for a lot of them, we haven't even seen any footage for them yet. And with some exceptions, I usually don't get overly hyped for a lot of movies until it gets much closer to the release date and I've seen exactly what we're in for. So we're just going to keep these in chronological order. Also, this should go without saying, but if you followed my channel from the beginning of last year, you'll know that most of the movies from my most anticipated of 2020 list got pushed back to this year. So you'll see a little bit of overlap when it comes to that list, which is why instead of doing a top 10 most anticipated, I'm going to do a top 21 most anticipated movies of the year. Because out of the 10 movies from last year, only 4 actually got released in 2020. So I wanted to go over what got pushed back, as well as make way for some newer films. Hopefully nothing else gets pushed again, but I know things are still up in the air as of now. One other thing is, this is only going to be made up of movies with locked-in release dates, especially given how unpredictable things are. Even in a normal year, there are tons of movies in development that are expected to be released in a certain year, and then for one reason or another, they're not. And the idea is that after this year, I'm not repeating movies on next year's list, but we'll see what happens. So some movies I'm leaving off here that would easily crack this list that are expected to be released in 2021, but we don't know for sure yet, include The French Dispatch, which got pushed from last year, but is yet to secure a new release date as of now, and rumor has it it'll hit cans in May, but nothing's confirmed as of now. We're also supposed to get Nightmare Alley from Guillermo del Toro, a new Paul Thomas Anderson movie currently with the working title Soggy Bottom, Taika Waititi's next film Next Goal Wins, and a new Macbeth film from Joel Cohen going solo for the first time. If those had concrete release dates, those would have all been easy locks for this, but unfortunately, that's not the case. I'm going to keep some of these short since there's not much to say on some of them, but let's not waste any more time and let's jump to my top 21 most anticipated movies of 2021. Kicking things off is Judas and the Black Messiah, the Fred Hampton biopic starring Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, which I know due to the Academy rules this year is making an Oscar play, and it had hands down my favorite trailer of last year. I'm not familiar with director Shaka King, who also co-wrote the screenplay, and I'm a bit weary when it comes to biopics in general, as you're trying to tell so much in such little time. But I mean, that trailer looks promising, it's got a great cast. I think both Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield could have some serious Oscar potential, plus Ryan Coogler is also involved as a producer. So I think this will be, at the very least, pretty good. Rarely have I ever seen a trailer as good as that was, and it ended up being flat out bad, so we'll see. This is part of the HBO Max Warner Brothers deal that sees release on February 12th. Next up is Minari, and I know for some people this has gone towards their 2020 movies. It briefly got a 2020 release, but it was a one-week screening at one theater virtually before it got pulled, so only so many people got to see it then. If you're including it towards your 2020 movies, great. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a 2021 movie. But it's from A24, who I love, and I've heard nothing but wonderful things about it, especially Steven Yeun's performance. I also really love deeply personal dramas, and this centers heavily around the relationships behind this family as they try to make a better life for themselves, so I think this will be something special. This also sees release on February 12th. Then we have The Father, another film which, for some, went towards their best of 2020 lists, but it only played at film festivals last year, so again, as far as I'm concerned, this will be a 2021 movie. But I've heard nothing but wonderful things about this as well. I've heard it's an incredibly emotional film, and from the sounds of it, this seems to be both Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman at the top of their game here. The fact we're not just getting a movie about a man who's dealing with his mind rapidly deteriorating, but we're seeing it from his point of view as well, it's sure to be extremely heartbreaking. And we get this on February 18th. Up next is Coming to America, or Coming to America 2, the long-awaited sequel to Eddie Murphy's 1988 classic, which has Akeem and Semi returning to America years later, when Akeem learns he has a son. While this does see most of the cast return, I am a bit weary with sequels that take place so many years after the original, but this is brought to us by director Craig Brewer, who also gave us the great Dolomite Is My Name, also with Murphy, and I love that. Plus, the trailer looked like a lot of fun, and I did laugh a number of times, so this may be an exception. This hits Amazon Prime on March 5th. Then we have Raya and the Last Dragon, the next film from Walt Disney Animation Studios, and I gotta say, it's right up their alley. It's about a fearless warrior who has to stop the last of a sinister group of dragons who once terrorized her world hundreds of years ago. You have a screenplay co-written by Adele Lim, who co-wrote Crazy Rich Asians, and you have Carlos Lopez Estrada, the director of Blind Spotting, and Don Hall, who brought us Moana and Big Hero 6, co-directing this. The animation looks stunning. The world that we'll be introduced to, I'm sure, will be absolutely beautiful and full of memorable characters. Plus, Disney Animation's just been on a roll for the most part these past 10 years or so it seems like this will be another major hit for them. This will be out on March 5th in both theaters and on Disney+, but with premiere access. Hopefully just not $30 again. And then we get The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, an action comedy which has my absolute favorite concept of the year, with Nicolas Cage starring as himself, who's paid to perform some of his most notable scenes at a birthday party, but is secretly working as a CIA informant so he can also get cast in a Quentin Tarantino movie. I kid you not, that's really the premise, and it's just wild. This is going to be something else, just based on that premise alone. And then you add to the mix Pedro Pascal as this crazed billionaire who's a fan of Cage's, and he's just been crushing it as of late. Plus you have Tiffany Haddish and Neil Patrick Harris in the supporting cast. We haven't seen any footage yet, I'm not familiar with the writer and director, but that premise alone has me sold. It's probably going to be off the wall, we're probably going to get a lot of self-deprecating jokes from Cage, and if it hits all the right notes, it could be one of the year's funniest movies. This is scheduled for March 19th. Then we get No Time to Die, a film that we were so close to getting. And I mean, we were weeks away from this movie when the pandemic hit and it got pushed back not once, but twice. Hopefully third time's a charm. As I'm sure you're all aware, this is the final James Bond movie with Daniel Craig, whose run I've enjoyed for the most part. Plus, you also have Cary Fukunaga behind the camera, and I loved his television work more than his film work, but his movies have still been very good. Also, Rami Malek as the villain should be a lot of fun. Now, I was a lot more hyped for this last year than I was this year, and this was actually on my most anticipated movies of 2020, and I think some of that hype has been deflated a bit because it got pushed back multiple times, but I'm still looking forward to it a lot. I think it'll be a great final outing for Daniel Craig, and it should be fun, so this will hopefully be out on April 2nd. Then we get Bob's Burgers the movie, which I know is a hell of a pivot from No Time to Die. This has no plot announced, but I am a huge Bob's Burgers fan, which is why I'm excited for this. It's one of my favorite comedies currently on TV, and as far as I'm concerned, it's still been pretty on point as of late. Everyone from the show is involved with this, so it should be fun. I really don't have much to say on this because we have no footage and no details, but I mean, if it's even half as good as the show, I'm sure it'll be awesome. As of now, it's looking at an April 9th release. Then we get to Last Night in Soho, about a young woman passionate about fashion design who finds out 1960s London isn't all that it seems. Another film from last year's most anticipated list. The main reason I was looking forward to this is Edgar Wright, who is quite possibly one of my favorite directors working today. I've loved all of his movies to date, and this isn't just his first totally serious film, at least judging by the description, but it's also his first venture into a full-on horror movie, and not just horror comedy like Shaun of the Dead. Plus, you have Anya Taylor-Joy as the lead, who's shown she can be great at horror with The Witch and Split. So there's a lot to look forward to. We've only seen photos as of now, and there hasn't been any sort of footage, but considering who's involved, it should be a wild ride. We'll see this on April 23rd. Then we get A Quiet Place 2, which we were also very close to getting early last year, as it was also just around the time COVID started, though this didn't move around as much as No Time to Die did. While the first movie wasn't one of my absolute favorites of the year, it's still a really well done film. It was a great concept, plus I loved the mix of personal family drama and horror, and the fact that it was able to tell such an effective story with little to no dialogue. And everyone involved in the first one's back for this, along with some new faces. So hopefully lightning strikes twice, and I'm excited to see what else they can do with this world. And we'll also get this on April 23rd. Then we get to The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which I'm a little hesitant about going into it because I love the first two films. They're two of my favorite horror movies from the past decade, and Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are back in the leads after a few years of all these spin-off movies. But James Wan is only a producer this time, and we instead get Michael Chaves, who was behind The Curse of La Llorona, one of said spin-off movies, which I thought was only okay. So I'm definitely not expecting something that's on the same level as the first two movies, but I'm hoping it'll at least be pretty good. The only other thing that has me somewhat hopeful is that one of the writers from the second movie, who also co-wrote Aquaman with James Wan, which I enjoyed, is also writing this. So we'll see how this goes. This will be out on June 4th. Next up is Ghostbusters Afterlife, another holdover from my most anticipated movies list last year. I'd say my excitement for this one is just about the same. I'm sure some people may be a little hesitant with this, as it's been a pain trying to get a direct Ghostbusters sequel off the ground for decades, but I'm very excited for what this has to offer, simply because Jason Reitman is writing and directing this. While I don't find every movie of his to be great, I do enjoy most of his films, like Juno, Up in the Air, and Tully. He brings a lot of wit and charm to his movies, and his style seems like a great fit for this franchise. The fact that he's Ivan Reitman's son aside. Plus, it looks like it's heavily trying to evoke that 80s adventure feel in the vein of Stranger Things, which is especially fitting with Finn Wolfhard on board. But I think after years of development hell, the wait will be worth it for this one, and we'll see it on June 11th. Then we get In the Heights, yet another one of my most anticipated movies of last year. I'm a big fan of musicals. I'm always excited whenever I hear a new one's going to be out, and the trailer did look really nice. I'd say I'm a little more excited for this one now than I was last year. I haven't seen the original Broadway play, but after having seen Hamilton for the first time on Disney Plus last year, now knowing how enjoyable Lin-Manuel Miranda's music can be, that has me a little more excited for this, especially with Anthony Ramos, who was in Hamilton, now in the lead for this. Plus, add in John M. Chu as the director, and it should be a fun film just in time for the summer, if all goes well. This will be out on June 18th. Then we have Luca, Pixar's next film from first-time director Enrico Casarosa, about a young boy who's also a sea monster in the Italian Riviera. And this hopefully should be interesting. A few images have been released. The animation, from what I can tell, does look really nice, though the cast hasn't been revealed, but I'm always genuinely excited for whatever Pixar has to offer. They seem like they're mostly back on track after being a bit hit and miss in the early to mid 2010s, especially after having recently just watched Soul. But not too many details are out yet, so we'll just see how this goes. And this also gets a release on June 18th. Next up is The Suicide Squad, the standalone sequel and soft reboot to 2016's Suicide Squad. I generally don't get overly excited for superhero movies, to be honest. I look forward to them, don't get me wrong there, because they are fun event films and it is fun discussing some of the lore behind a lot of these superhero characters, but I generally like to proceed with caution on most of them. So why include a sequel to what's regarded as one of the worst entries in a very hit and miss movie universe? Well, James Gunn is pretty much the only reason that has me more excited for this than most other superhero movies this year. I loved both Guardians of the Galaxy movies, plus I also enjoyed his other two films, Slither and Super. I think his bonkers, off-the-wall style of humor is a perfect fit for this ragtag bunch of characters, and it's supposedly going to be rated R, which hasn't been officially confirmed, but if that's indeed the case, it will bring him back to the style of his early days. And with such an eclectic cast that includes Margot Robbie, Idris Elba, John Cena, Sylvester Stallone, and many others, I think this will be an absolute blast. So we'll get this one on August 6th. And that brings us to Dune, another holdover from my list from last year, and this is the big one. I will say, of everything listed here, this would be my number one most anticipated movie if I were to rank them. I haven't read the book series, and I didn't particularly care for David Lynch's version, but the fact that it's Denis Villeneuve, another of today's best directors, had me sold before I even saw one piece of footage. And when we got the trailer, it pretty much confirmed that we're going to be in for something special. I'm getting a lot of Game of Thrones vibes from the look of this world, especially with some of the costume designs, plus the effects from what we can see in the trailer look top notch, and the cast is phenomenal. Timothée Chalamet, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Rebecca Ferguson, Dave Bautista, and so many others. Easily has one of the year's best casts. Plus, it'll be nice to just have a new fantasy world to explore that isn't one of the big superhero franchises. We're gonna get a unique, new universe with all this lore that we'll be able to discuss, especially if all the books get adapted and we get this whole new franchise, which I'm sure will be the case. So it'll be nice. I honestly think this will be the year's biggest film, and we get that October 1st, as of now in theaters and on HBO Max, but I know there are some talks about it going to theaters only, so we'll see. Next up is Halloween Kills, the last of the holdovers from my list last year. I really enjoyed Halloween 2018. I found it bloody, exciting, and a lot of fun. And I also liked the dark comedy approach it took as well, with some of the absurd conversations characters would have in between the more thrilling scenes to help cut some of the tension. I didn't find that to be an issue in terms of tone. I also thought Jamie Lee Curtis did an excellent job returning as Laurie Strode, so I'm happy to see that everyone behind that film is returning for this, as well as one more sequel in 2022. David Gordon Green set to return to direct. He'll be co-writing it again with Danny McBride, and most of the cast from Halloween 2018 will be back. Given everyone who's returning, lightning should hopefully strike twice, and this will hopefully be out on October 15th. Then we have The Last Duel, directed by Ridley Scott, focusing on a duel in 14th century France between two best friends settling a dispute regarding one of their wives. I know Ridley Scott doesn't exactly have the same consistency now as he did in the 70s and 80s, so I understand why when one hears of a new movie of his, it's difficult to be excited. I get it. Truthfully, the fact that this is a period piece has me a bit weary as well, as I'm not really a fan of these sort of films. But it's being described more as a thriller than a simple, straightforward drama, which is part of why I'm a little more open to it. And also, truthfully, I've enjoyed Ridley Scott's last three movies, in particular The Martian. And on top of that, you have Ben Affleck and Matt Damon co-writing the screenplay, which is the first time they're writing together since Good Will Hunting. So that's exciting. Plus, Damon himself is one of the leads, along with Adam Driver and Affleck having a supporting role. So it's got a great cast and crew. I know there's no trailer yet, so we'll see what happens there, but I have some high hopes for this, and we'll hopefully see this one on October 15th. Then we have Encanto, Walt Disney Animation Studios' 60th feature film, which is just absolutely incredible. We're at 60. This is about a young girl who belongs to a magical family with powers in Colombia who has no powers herself. Details are otherwise mostly scarce on this one, especially since it's not until closer to the end of the year. But we have Byron Howard and Jared Bush directing this, with Bush as one of the co-writers, and they both had their hands in many of Disney's more recent hits. Most notably, they worked on Zootopia together. Plus, Lin-Manuel Miranda is on this list again, as he will be working on the music for this one. I loved what he did with Moana, so I'm expecting something magical for Disney's 60th, and we'll get this one on November 24th. Next up is West Side Story, the second film adaptation of the classic Broadway musical after the beloved 1961 version. As I said earlier, I'm a big musical fan, but with a project like this, I'd normally be a little hesitant as I thought the original was great. And if we're going to get a new musical, I'd rather something original or something that hasn't been previously adapted. But the main reason I am looking forward to this is that Steven Spielberg is directing this one. And I'm not saying anytime he's on board, it's a surefire masterpiece, but he's certainly been pretty consistent throughout his entire career. Even if I haven't loved all of his films, I can't think of the last one that I'd say I flat out disliked. A lot of his recent movies were at least pretty good, and there's always a lot of heart and soul that goes into each of his movies. They usually bring out so much emotion, and I think if anyone's going to remake such a beloved classic and make it work almost just as well, it would be him. So we'll see this on December 10th. And finally, we have the untitled Spider-Man Far From Home sequel. We don't know the title, and we don't know the plot details. But for one thing, I have enjoyed the two Spider-Man movies we've got from the MCU. I found them to be very well done, and to be honest, I know I said I usually don't get overly hyped for superhero movies, but Spider-Man was the first superhero I was ever introduced to growing up. I played the video games growing up, I've seen some of the shows, I've always enjoyed the movies. He lives in New York, which is where I'm from, so there's that on top of all that. I've always had a soft spot for the character, so I'm usually pretty excited for any new Spider-Man movies. But the main reason this especially piqued my interest is the fact that we're getting pretty much a live-action version of Into the Spider-Verse, based on the little we've been told. Jamie Foxx is back, Alfred Molina is back. It's expected that Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, Emma Stone, and Kirsten Dunst will return, and I've enjoyed most of those older movies, and I think what will be nice about revisiting them is the fact that I hope we get some sort of closure with both versions of the character. The Tobey Maguire stuff ended with Spider-Man 3, which I actually don't hate, but for the obvious reasons, it was pretty meh. The Andrew Garfield stuff, we had Amazing Spider-Man 2, they were setting things up for more, and that instead turned into Spider-Man joining the MCU. So I hope this allows both versions of the character to go out on more of a high note if this winds up being their only appearance. So that would be nice. But I will say though, after this, I really hope the next time we get a Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, it's just him in New York on his own adventures, and not in the shadow of another MCU figure or as part of some big event. That would be really nice. But still, this should be fun, and if all goes well, we should see this on December 17th. And that's what we have to look forward to in 2021. And as I was looking at what's locked in for our release date, I noticed that almost every week there's something pretty big coming out. Superhero movies, big budget action movies, sci-fi movies, and on and on and on. Whereas 2020 was the year of the indie movie, this is going to be the year of the blockbuster. Like one week right after another, right after another, right after another. So it's going to be pretty busy. And on top of all that, I'm sure plenty of hidden gems are going to sneak their way in there, and there will be plenty of surprise hits. You know how it usually goes. I doubt that my best of 2021 list, even if all of these didn't get delayed, is going to look a lot different than this. But it should be fun, and I'm excited to see what this year has to bring. So let me know, what movies this year are you looking forward to? Was there anything I listed here? Something I left off? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll catch you next time.